In my last video, I walked through what January 15th actually is, and more importantly, what it's not. Since then, there's been a lot of new information, a lot of social media speculation, and frankly, a lot of bad takes. So this video is an update, not a reversal, not a hype cycle, an update based on what we now know about the committee timelines, why part of the markup was pushed back, and the political narrative forming around the midterms. Because this story is getting more complicated, and that's exactly when clarity matters the most. Let's start with what actually changed. Originally, both Senate committees, banking and agriculture, were scheduled to work on the Clarity Act in mid January. Here's the update: the Senate Banking Committee is moving forward with its markup tomorrow on January 15th. The Senate Agriculture Committee has pushed it back to the last week of January. That timeline is important. This does not mean that the bill is stalled. It means that the two committees are moving at different speeds, which is very normal for market structure legislation, but it does change how quickly the bill can move forward. The obvious question is, why did the Agricultural Committee slow things down? And the answer is substance, not sabotage. The Agricultural Committee has jurisdiction over derivatives, futures markets, and large parts of the CFTC's authority. That puts them at the center of the SEC versus CFTC debate. And there are still unresolved questions around how certain tokens are classified, how DeFi protocols interact with derivatives rules, and where the CFTC's authority begins and ends. Pushing that markup to late January signals one thing: they are still negotiating the hard parts. That's not delay for delay's sake. That's lawmakers trying to avoid writing a bad law. Now let's address the elephant in the room. On social media, there's a growing narrative that Democrats are intentionally dragging this out to avoid passing crypto legislation before the midterms. Here's the grounded reality: yes, elections always influence timelines, but this bill is not being slowed by one party acting alone. The friction points slowing this progress are bipartisan: stablecoin yield provisions, DeFi developer liability, conflicts of interest with public officials, and agency power boundaries. These issues divide both parties internally. This isn't Democrats versus Republicans. It's institutional risk tolerance versus innovation speed. That distinction matters because oversimplifying this into partisan conspiracy leads people to misunderstand how legislation actually moves. So let's update the timeline. Realistically, January 15th, the Banking Committee markup begins. Late January, Agricultural Committee markup will resume. After that, the drafts still need to be merged, language still needs consensus, and leadership still needs confidence that the bill can survive a floor vote. That puts us firmly in months-long process, not weeks. The most realistic window remains later in 2026, before the midterm elections, when lawmakers still have the incentive to show progress without rushing unfinished regulations. Nothing about this accelerates the timeline. If anything, it confirms the original takeaway: this is slow, procedural, infrastructural work. Now, here's the part that gets lost in all of the noise. Despite the delays, debates, and politics, the process is still moving forward. Committees are engaged, drafts are being revised, jurisdiction is being negotiated, not ignored. That's a very different environment than the enforcement first regulation. For institutions watching from the sidelines, this matters far more than a single date on the calendar. So if you're looking for fireworks on January 15th, you're going to be disappointed. But if you're looking for signals that regulatory infrastructure is being taken seriously, this update reinforces that. I'll continue tracking this as it develops, especially once the Agricultural Committee reconvenes later this month. And when something truly changes, not just politically, but structurally, we'll talk about it here, clearly, calmly, and without the hype.